I'm Jenny Mish. I'm the Executive Director of the Sustainable Business Council here in Missoula. And this is our second event in a series of 3 on social sustainability. So people are often familiar with the idea of the triple bottom line, that sustainability is about people, planet, and profit, like a 3-legged stool. But the social piece sometimes gets neglected because, you know, for a variety of reasons. It's not as tangible, it's hard to measure, it's, you know, people think of the environment. But, you know, economic sustainability is a really important part, and so is the social part. So we did this series to try and highlight some social aspects of sustainability. Our first event was 2 weeks ago today in this room with Topher Williams from Mountain Line and Lisa Dworak from Missoula in Motion talking about transit-friendly workplaces. And that, like tonight's presentation, was recorded by MCAT and will be aired on MCAT. So if you're interested in looking for that, it's available. It will be available. And then we have tonight, our focus is on inclusive workplaces and inclusive work environments. And then 2 weeks from tonight, we'll have our last event in the series, which will be on environmental health at work. And that will be highlighting issues around indoor air pollution and the toxins in our indoor environments that we're not necessarily aware of, and how much that affects employee productivity and health and attendance and happiness, which is a factor in all of our topics in our series and others as well. That the more a workplace really celebrates and welcomes the employees and the customers, the more productive the workplace is in many ways, and the higher the quality of life. So that's about this series. I do want to say thanks to Adventures Heights Cycling for making us welcome in this wonderful room, and thanks to Romaines for the food, and help me, please, my trusty ally here. So we have really excellent sponsorship support from Balance Tech and Axiom for this series, and we really appreciate their getting behind wanting to get the word out about social sustainability. So thanks very much to our title sponsors. We also have support from Your Energy Fix, Patrick McCormick, Realtor, The Good Food Store, Missoulian, Trial 93, Family Dental Group, Missoulian, Kent Watson and Associates, of course, Mountain Line, and MissoulaEvents.net. So we thank all of them for making these events possible. Our events are always free, almost always free, and you know, it costs something to make them happen. So without sponsorships, we can't do it. And excuse me. We also need support from individuals. So if what we do is important to you, please consider making a donation or joining on behalf of your organization. There's plenty of materials in the back. So I think I mentioned most of our providers for tonight, but Liquid Planet and Big Sky also provided some drinks, so thanks to them. We have some really exciting upcoming programs that I wanted to just announce to get them on your radar. We have identified that there's an opportunity to do some education around waste in Missoula, and we're really excited about making April, which is Earth Day month, into moving Missoula towards Zero Waste Month. And we have lots of activities involved with this whole month of events. There's going to be a whole calendar of events. We've got lots of participants already, and we want lots more. If you're doing an Earth Day event or any other kind of event, you can add it free to our calendar, and we'll tell people about it. We've got tours of EcoCompost and the wastewater treatment plant. We've got tours of Home Resource and the food recycling program at Dining, and we've got you know, events with the MDA, and Opportunity Resources is opening a brand new e-waste deconstruction facility, and they're going to have events. So we're doing lots of partnerships. Companies like Energetics and other companies are sponsoring Heritage Timber. So if you have anything that's at all related to waste that you can show off, tour, celebrate, teach about, or if you're doing an event that you'd like to turn into a zero waste event or move towards zero waste, please consider participating by getting your event on our calendar. We also have a webinar coming up to help people learn how to plan zero waste events. And it's an hour, super easy. It's easier than you think. It's not rocket science to plan a zero waste event. It just takes a little planning ahead. So it's really worthwhile learning about. So please consider signing up for that webinar.
Video?
Yes. So then yeah, this is our 33-second video.
We don't have speakers, so we just have to listen to the laptop. We'll see.
The Sustainable Business Council is planning a whole month dedicated to moving Missoula towards zero waste in April 2015. With a 40-page guidebook, a webinar on how to organize a zero waste event, and a full calendar of tours and hands-on activities. Contact the SBC today if you have a waste reduction story to tell, if your organization would like to host or sponsor an event, or if you need a business solution for a waste issue. Help move Missoula towards zero waste with the SBC this April.
So see, I said all that stuff, and we could have just showed you the video. But I didn't mention the 40-page guidebook that we're producing on moving Missoula towards zero waste. And it is going to be packed with information. It's going to have maps. It's going to have step-by-step instructions for how to do a waste audit in your business, and it's going to talk about contamination and all the different recycling streams, and I mean just lots of information about how to reduce, reuse, repair, and of course recycle in Missoula, redesign. So we also, I have one more announcement, which is that every year in March usually we do a major event in partnership with the business school. And this year, our annual sustainability lecture at the business school is going to be with Mark Buckley, who is the Vice President of Environmental Affairs for Staples Corporation. So he's coming from Boston, and he's going to be doing a public lecture that'll be free at the business school called The Circular Economy, Waste as a Resource. So one of the things that's really happening in corporate planning is really looking at how to move. All of our corporations are looking at how to move towards a circular economy where every kind of waste is reused in one way or another. And so I'm really looking forward to hearing how that's happening at Staples and what he, like one of the things he said to me on the phone as we were planning that is, do you know that the average drill in the United States gets 12 minutes of use during its entire life? So that's kind of a great little visual for how much opportunity there is to rethink about how redesign how we use material resources, and you know that affects people too. Here we are with the social sustainability. So that I think is the end of my announcements. You've been very patient. We were going to have 3 speakers tonight. Laura John is the only tribal policy analyst in the country. She works for the Montana Budget and Policy Center, and she got caught up in Helena today with the legislature and was unable to get back to Missoula in time to join us. So I'm really sad about that. I'm going to have to lean on our other panelists to step in and fill her shoes as well. But we're excited about having, I'm going to introduce both of our panelists so that they can pass the microphone from one to the other. Our second panelist will be Kristen Hoffman, who works at Town Pump, and she'll be talking about her personal experiences about being open in her workplace, about being a trans female, trans woman. I get so self-conscious, like so many people, about whether I'm using the right words. So please forgive me if I use the wrong words. And Liz Russa-Millar is the director of the University Center. And probably everybody in the room has been in the University Center and is aware that it's an environment that is really inclusive and welcoming to people of all ethnicities and languages and backgrounds and ages and disabilities and abilities and sexual orientations and genders and religions, and I probably missed a class. So anyway, humans, all humans, all humans. Some animals are also welcome, right? So Liz is going to talk to us more about creating an inclusive environment. Please help me welcome Liz Russa-Millar. There you go.
Thank you so much. This is a huge honor to be invited here. And of course, in honor of sustainability, I printed you some things. I know, the irony, but I can't help myself. I actually could have done this electronically, but I was running short on time and didn't know with the glitches and my ability. So I'm going to hand you what is it's a two-pager, but it's on one sheet, and it basically is sort of the title of my introductory remarks and a basic outline that I probably won't follow at all. And then after, I have a parting gift, which is some scholarly work for you to read on your own time, because that's what we do at universities. We try to help you learn new things. And one of my goals here is to learn from you as well. I know every time I engage with people around the topic of social justice or social sustainability that I learn something every time. So I hope that we can have an engaging conversation probably after Kristen's remarks and her personal story. My story is personal as well. When I was asked to come, it was because I was identified as a person who could speak to this topic, because we, the University Center, are considered an inclusive work environment. And it was by an employee or a former employee of the University Center. So that means a lot to me. That is evidence, one, anecdotal, right, that we are creating that environment that we hope we're creating. And it's one of those things that no matter what you do, it's an organization or a business, a company, whatever you want to call it. It's a physical environment, and individuals operate within it. And everyone will perceive inclusivity differently. Everyone will have their own experience in the UC as an employee, as a student, as a faculty or staff member, and they may not have felt included. So I don't devalue that we are hitting every single person. We're 100% guaranteed success. We have a lot of work to do. And one of the things that I'm going to talk about is social justice ally development. And a big part of social justice ally development is recognizing that it's a process. There are places you falter, always. Always. You'll never be an achieved social justice ally. You don't get a badge, a sash, or a crown, or anything. You're always working toward it. It's a level of action. It's a personal belief system. Oh, I should hit my microphone. It's also, some people argue it's not an identity. I claim, for me, it is an identity. So I'll talk a little bit about that. But one of the problems with having such a short period of time is I can't make a full day workshop out of this. So I'm going to try to keep my remarks succinct and sort of tease you about this idea. And then hopefully you'll read my article that I hand to you at the end, and you'll want to learn more. And all you have to do is use your magic Google machine, and you can learn more. And you can learn more and more, and then you could apply it and go back to the internet machine and learn more and more. So once again, many of you are already social justice allies. Many of you are very active social justice allies. My assumption, which may be wrong, that's part of why you're here today. Right? Do you identify with that? Do you own that? You're here about sustainability. Sustainability, although I don't speak about it usually in business terms, but to me has an anchor in diversity and inclusivity. There is nothing about sustainability that says to me, you ignore diversity and social justice. That's one of the three legs, correct? So I wanted to go a little deeper than giving you a checklist. If I was a company and said, well, what do I need to do to comply as a social justice and or socially sustainable work environment? Check, you know, I need to have a policy that includes gender expression, sexual orientation, all of those things about protected class. Check. I need to have policies dealing with things related to behavior, things related to what policies don't apply to. The law is one thing, but policies for my department. I need to have physical symbols of inclusion. I need to ensure there's pictures on walls with rainbows, pictures on walls with various and sundry ethnic groups represented, right? I need to do all these things to define my space. That's easy, but how do you live it? How do you become a person who truly believes it in your core and operates from a perspective a social justice ally would, which is behavior-based? So that's a personal journey. That's very personal. And for me, this topic is very personal because I didn't always see the world as I do now. I didn't see the world as justice and injustice, as systems that oppress and people. I always thought I could do more as a woman than people told me I could. Oh, no, no, no. Those rules don't apply to me. Women can play rugby, the same rules. I'll do that. And I did that. And it was like, well, we have the same rules. But yet I saw misogyny every day in rugby. And it was like, well, okay, that wasn't it. There's still things in life that are holding me back, but it's because of me. So I went on my personal journey of exploring what is oppression, what is power, what's privilege, what can I do as an agent, because I'm woman, change what it means to disrupt that system that oppresses me. So there's 3 words that I use that help to define the word ally. And agency to me is different than being an ally. Advocacy is different to me than being an ally. And here's why. The way I define the terms is an advocate is somebody who speaks for the voiceless. So I will take an issue forward for somebody who does not have a place at the table. I'm advocating for somebody. An agent is somebody who is a part of a social group, like women, who are oppressed systemically for some reason. You know, systems that oppress us. I am an agent, therefore I am a member of that group, and I'm going to disrupt those systems through my agency. An ally, on the other hand, is somebody who is not a member of that oppressed group, who works with people who are a part of that oppressed group to disrupt systems that oppress them. Is that clear? So these are how the terms differ for me. Some people, and the article I give you will actually use the word advocate, and I don't mind because there's different ways of using words interchangeably, but it's more than advocacy. It's not speaking for others, it's joining them, okay? So that's very important as a social justice ally. So on the handout I gave you, there's a definition of social justice ally, and that's from a scholar who writes in student affairs. And in student affairs, we often, as a field, we write about ways that we can help students to develop, to grow, to become people who want to fight for equality, people who want to fight for equality for themselves and others, right? So our goal is to help students to come to that place. And now translating that to the workplace is really easy for me, which is wonderful to see that there is a scholarly article that does just that. It talks about it from a human resource perspective. Why aren't we developing social justice allies in our workforce? Why aren't we making it okay for people to fight for equality within a work environment? So basically creating a closed organization where equality is very important, and equality for all oppressed groups, which creates a lot of complexity. And a lot of workplaces don't like to bring in complexity that deals with identities. And a lot of people who are going through various processes themselves with understanding and learning about their identities don't necessarily want to bring it to work. How safe do you feel at work? Do you feel you can be who you are at work? Some people can, some people can't. And there's a process for that too. So some people separate. Then when you enter a work environment, you often look for those inclusive environments. You say, well, look, they've got the policies, check, check, check. They seem to walk the walk. In the interview, they seemed to recognize that equality is very important to me, and they seem to be that place that's inclusive. So then you are hired, and to stay, you need to see it over and over again. You need to know that that culture of that organization is consistent with what you saw in the interview, right? So that requires all of the employees of that organization to have some perspective on social justice. They have to know that it's a value to them. They have to know that the company values it, or why bother, right? And it's not easy as a company, right? Because no matter what, you're made up of people. So individuals define the culture of an organization. And if those individuals aren't allowed or invited to the process of exploring what it is to be a social justice ally, then they won't, because that's not what you're inviting them to do. I, at the University Center, have done what I consider it's almost natural to me. I behave as a social justice ally. Over the years, one of my big stumbling blocks in my process was forgiving myself for my failings. So getting over white guilt, huge struggle. Okay, I'm better. Now, dealing with some things I might say, words I use, misuse. Oh, I can't believe I said the wrong pronoun or said this. You were talking about that, Jenny. So getting over that and learning to forgive as an ally is huge. And so some examples that I wanted to briefly talk about, because I want Kristen to have plenty of time, and we can go back to this if you want after her remarks, which might be good to frame it actually, is that there are different ways to behave as an ally at work. But there's also one of those things that you have to recognize is you also have agency, right? Because you have multiple identities. So you need to behave as an agent and an ally. And this is a recent thing I've explored about my process and my journey, was that I was often hiding behind my allies, my behavior as an ally, and not being an agent. So I have a capacity because of my job, I have a scope of influence that is pretty broad. And I wasn't being an agent. I wasn't breaking down barriers for other women in my organization like I should have, and helping women to develop and to grow within the organization. Because believe it or not, even in higher education, there's still sexism. There's a glass ceiling and a sticky floor, and we still live that, right? It's not over, so it's a fight. It's a constant fight for agents. So I was finding myself always being the ally, which is I can be open, I don't have anything to lose, right? And I've learned to forgive myself, so even when I do misstep, it's okay. I forgive. And I'm always growing, and it was more rewarding for me, albeit it's a struggle at times, but it was more rewarding for me than being an agent, because that's hard work. Because I have to really fight, and I have to be vulnerable and take risks. So my journey has led me to a place of continuously working on being a social justice ally, but also acknowledging my work as an agent. Advocacy, of course, is easy, but you have to be careful of speaking for people who don't want to be spoken for. So watch yourself with that. Anyway, I've done that. I forgave myself. Basically, the definition and the process of being a social justice ally at work is not difficult, but it's very personal, and it takes introspection, and it also takes the ability to learn in public and to be open to conversations with others in the workplace that may be uncomfortable for you or them. So it's one of those things that you have to know your organization, you have to know yourself, and you have to recognize opportunities. So I think on the back, I have in that outline, I have some very, very broad guiding questions. And how many of you are currently employed at an organization that you feel values social justice? Most, but not everybody, okay? So if you feel that way, how can you be a social justice ally out and proud, right? You actually have to say, okay, how about my neighbor in the cubicle next to me? And I'm just, cubicles. My cubicle neighbor. What are their identities? What do I see as their identities? What do I feel comfortable with having a conversation with them? And this is, the revolutionary in me is always trying to build alliances and then build the revolution, right? And then stop bitching and start or continue the revolution. So one of the things I think about is as you connect with coworkers who share your values of social justice, you then can start building that conversation and growing the social justice allies within an organization that leads to a cultural shift. Because like I said, the people define the culture. The hardest part for me is that if you have influential people in your organization who do not have any interest in equality, huge problem. Huge problem. But if you get enough people from the middle or at any other level who start talking about, don't you think that we should probably change this policy? Or don't you think that we should stop encouraging sexist remarks in staff meetings? I'm tired of being the only one speaking out. And everybody else has their head down because they're afraid. I'm tired of that. So it's hard because you have to take risks, right? But let's pretend that suddenly the masses become the majority. We value social justice, we value equality. We are disrupting racism, we are disrupting sexism any chance we get, even in staff meetings. Even if the boss is there, who's a huge bigot, right? So there's a process that can happen, but you have to really care about it, want to be it, take the risk. And that's, to me, why it was easier for me to become a social justice ally than implant my values at work. right? I am the director. I have influence, right? I have a huge scope of influence. So I can impact much faster. So I say, if you want to work for an organization that values social justice, you should interview for an organization that values social justice, right? So don't put yourself in a place that you're not going to be retained because you don't want to be there because they are bigots and blah, 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 right? So that's the other thing. If you do have an influence or scope of influence at your work now, spread it, grow it, build it. Because you can, even if the other people don't, they're not quite there yet or even think that equality is important. And in their personal value set, they've never even thought about oppression because they come from privileged places. Then you have ability to change that. But you can't do it alone. You can do it with yourself alone, right? Anyway, so it's quarter after, so I want Kristen to tell her story. But after I have this article for you, and I left those guiding questions with you, and before I turn it over, do you have any pressing questions, any confusion? Because I know terminology is very complicated in these conversations. Because definitions of social justice don't match, and definitions of allies. So any quick comments or questions? Okay, let's hear from Kristen. And you can sit or stand. Do you prefer? Oh.
All right, thank you, Liz. That was a great lecture. So, or speech. Well said. So either way, give her a hand. So for my spiel here, I'm basically gonna be talking about my experiences, what I see at work every day, and I'm going to try to think of it and translate it in a way you guys can understand it. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and give a little quick Trans 101. Some of you may understand, but others may not. So, okay, so there's a big distinguishing factor between transgender and transsexual. Transgender is someone who might identify as that opposite sex or whatever you're identifying as. Transsexual is someone who is post-op. Okay, and with that said, me personally, I identify as a female, so it's she, her, etc. For pronouns, others might do masculine, or other people might do neither. So pertaining to work, I think that's done. So now with me in work now, I'm currently a cashier at Town Pump. And as you know, according to the HRC, ExxonMobil is like amongst the worst for like LGBT equality. Like they provide no relevant insurance or any of that sort. At times people can actually get fired from their jobs for being out for those locations where there are no protections. And sadly enough, transgender people get the worst of it. So now I'm gonna go into my coming out experience. So I came out last March. Backing up a little before that, it really helped enough that I also had a coworker who was trans. So fortunately, they were able to help me with all of this. And so they mentioned writing up a letter that I could sit there and take to my employer, and I would just present that letter to my employer. They would read it, so forth. So it really did take a lot of planning and effort to do that. And trust me, that took a lot of courage to do that also, especially when it's night. It's just outside Missoula, so it's kind of gets the sketchy line part on whether or not if it would follow the Missoula's non-discrimination ordinance. So we had to have that thing worded carefully, and needless to say, it took lots of time to get that written out. So I'm going to go ahead and read the letter that I have here to give you guys an idea on like what I had. So, manager, I'm here to take a few moments to share what is on my mind with you and what is happening in my life outside of work. Sharing this with you is taking a lot of courage and energy, so I ask you to be patient. What was that? Anyway, and finish this letter before we talk about any of its contents. I've been visiting with the psychiatrist for about 6 months in regards to gender dysphoria, or GD. GD is the medical terminology for transgenderism and transsexualism. In other words, I carry the mind of a female, identify myself as a female, and would like my physical self and social experiences reflect my self-identity. In the 6 months of visiting my psychiatrist, I have started a long and tedious process to meld my body with my mind. I started hormone replacement therapy on December 5th of 2013. I have slowly been replacing my wardrobe to female attire and donating my male clothes. And on February 28th, I have started laser hair removal, and former sessions go through mid-2014. The future events I'd like for you to be aware of is that will affect Town Pump. I will be seeking a legal name change sometime in July. In reality, it was actually August, but updates as I get closer. And after doing this, I will begin living full-time as a female in all facets of my life. Finally, I will be attending voice therapy to help raise my pitch from my low male voice to a more comfortable feminine pitch. This will not affect my work performance in any way. I'm still the same person inside, but you will see a changing body on the outside. This, again, is to match my mind with my body and will make me a happier person in the long run. Thus, the type of support I could ask for is that I be called Kristen, referred with female pronouns, like I was telling you guys just a moment ago. After I'm able to tell the rest of the crew, and as they become used to the idea. There are other work-related items that will come up, I'm sure, but we can deal with them together as they manifest themselves. If as time continues you have any questions regarding the medical, psychological, and social changes I'm going through, or any questions about the transgender community and our experiences, please do not hesitate to contact me or the person who helped me. We both have resources and knowledge we would be happy to share with you if you'd like. So that's basically the contents of my letter here. So, like I said, yeah, it's quite extensive. So I cannot have all this credit to myself. I do have to extend it out to that person who did help me write it. So now back to the main story. So I went up to my management, I believe it was like on March 16th or something like that. And I just had her read it. I just handed her the letter and just said, read it, and didn't say anything. I just sat there quietly, nervously in the chair, like hoping nothing bad was going to happen. She just read it, like took 3-4 minutes to read it. I think she's like sitting trying to process the whole thing. So yeah, it was quite scary. And she just finally looked up for me and said, okay, that must have been hard for you to do. I mean, I'll admit, I was nearly in tears when after that was all said and done. So then we just talked a little bit. She asked how my family took it. That's irrelevant right now. And then a couple weeks after that, I finally came out in a store meeting and basically just gave them the same spiel, like it was a simplified version of that. I don't remember all the contents of it, so I'm not going to tell you that.
Christy, can I ask, how long had you been working there when you gave your manager that letter?
At that time, I was about 2 months shy of a year. Continuing on. So after I gave my whole spiel to my coworkers, that's where a surprise moment came to me. That's like where most of them said that, well, one of them said that this is like a while ago, so I'm trying to remember everything. Please forgive me. That we support you. What name do you want us to call you by again? Et cetera, et cetera. And then the district manager is there because, you know, district manager is never at a specific store meeting unless something like that comes up. So, and the point that I'd like to make with her was that she said that any type of discrimination will not be tolerated. It will result in punishment or whatever their terminology is, and or termination. And this is also like gender identity and sexual orientation is not in the policy, but it can still fall indirectly in like the sexual harassment is the point that I'm making there. And yes, there have been a couple bad apples in the bunch, but for most part, everyone's like basically been on board. So that's the first like major story I wanted to share. The second example I have now leads to about 6 months ago. So I was doing my thing as normal at work, and I need to go to the bathroom. Who doesn't? So I went to the bathroom, but of course I went into the restroom of which gender I identified as. And I don't even know how all this came about, but I'll share with you what I've seen and heard. Like this one lady apparently got offended with me being in there. Then she walked back out while I was still in there, told her fiance, boyfriend, whatever, and they went up to the cashier up front and started complaining and ranting. And then when I walked back up there, I noticed that there's some people like ranting and raving about something, but I didn't know what it was about at the time until I heard like indirectly transgender. So then my coworker later on just sent them off to management and had management deal with it. And then the fiance came back to me and just like started outing me publicly, which is not cool at all. And like where everyone can hear, like tried to make me feel bad for it, and then walked away and made a formal complaint to the corporate office, which I'm pleased to say that they really didn't do much to me at all, which is great. But the take-home message from the story that is really important to say is that if you're someone's coworker and someone wants to come asking you about what gender someone is or whatever they are, don't answer them. Just say, it's none of my business, I don't know, something to that extent. Because that right there is still publicly outing me, even though it might be purely accidental, but it could still cause problems in the long run if those people really wanted to make a problem with it in the long run. Because like management, they didn't even answer his question either. They basically just filed the complaint with the corporate office. That was the end of it. And right a couple days later, I was back to what I was doing normally. Otherwise, I believe that's about it, really. So I'm hoping I can answer some more questions or comments.
Well, let's give a hand to both of our speakers for thank you very much, Ms. Lee. If you don't mind, I'll take the microphone,
Sure.
and that way we can, I'll make sure that our discussion, whatever discussion we have now, will get recorded, because that's, another audience that can benefit from us all being here. And I just want to say how, what a great combination of talks where we had, these terms identified, and then this great story that illustrates the difference between being an agent and how courageous it takes, how much courage it takes to be an agent, and that there were some allies that you encountered along the way, and some other places where people could have been better allies. right? And so it's a beautiful learning story and really helpful theory base that we have, for thinking about what it means to be social justice allies. So I like to think we're all social justice allies in the room, and yet we all will have questions, right? We all have our own stories about our identities that we may or may not feel comfortable about, even in ourselves, let alone in our workplaces, right? And we need to not jump to conclusions about each other, and we also need to be willing to take risks to learn. So this is a chance to take risks or not, and share comments, questions for either of our speakers, or about your own experience. Anybody? Yes.
And like say my stories could have easily gone along with your speech. So there's an example of that, of social justice ally.
Beautiful. There's a
So, Kristen, I do have a question. I guess I'm a bit confused about your coworkers and publicly outing you. Was there, if they were to say like she's a she and that's that, would that you would more prefer them to say I'm not sure, or would you like to have your coworkers be like, yeah, she's a she, and like positively stand by that?
So yes, I think I would ultimately prefer if I'm a she and she, then that's that, but really that's no one else's business unless I voluntarily disclose that. I hope that helps.
So like gender pronouns are sort of public, but then anything beyond that is your personal. Right.
If they perceive me as female, I'm just going to leave it as that, but anything beyond that is my business only unless I choose to disclose it.
Fair enough. Good question. Who's got something else you're curious about or would like to share?
I just have a question for you, Kristen. What would you have done? Like, do you ever think about what would have happened if your manager didn't accept like the letter, or if there was an issue with corporate? Like, do you have any idea what kind of steps you would have taken after that? That was kind of a scary question.
See, that's a big gray area because, like I said, that's like right on the border of like Missoula and then county land. So wasn't really sure if it fell into it. I was just really just taking a chance at that point. I probably would have tried to file a lawsuit if I could get the money for it and / find another job in town. But since there are other town publications in the city of Missoula, I would assume that maybe the non-discrimination ordinance would also apply outside of town also.
Yeah, and I think just to clarify, Town Pump has locations within the city limits that would apply under the city's non-discrimination ordinance, but this location was located right outside of city limits, so it's kind of a borderline case. It's very bright light. Other comments, questions, stories? Yes.
Okay, so you had mentioned that, fortunately, there were coworkers who were allies and responded positively and supportively. But then you also mentioned that there were a couple bad apples. So as a person, as an agent, do you have advice on how to try and work with those bad apples in your workplace to make them approach becoming allies?
I would sit there and like personally talk to them about your issue. If they want to keep persisting, that's when I would have to say take it up to the next step and start going to your management using a chain of command. So it'd be like your assistant manager, store manager, district, etc. And hopefully the appropriate steps can be taken then, because they may never be allies depending on what their views are. So with that, I cannot control that. That's really up to them, no matter what I do.
There's been a request to have an answer from a manager's perspective.
Well, thank you for that. Yeah, that's a really great question. And one of the things that if the organization has more social justice allies who wouldn't put the person on the spot, but would do that work for her. So if you have colleagues and coworkers who are the bad apples, the ones who aren't quite getting it, who may possibly just need some awareness raising, that can be addressed by allies. And it doesn't have to be in a public forum, and it doesn't have to be in a negative way before it gets to management. So if there are those allies who are willing to even just disrupt a water cooler conversation and say, no, I don't feel comfortable with you speaking about Kristen like that. She has rights, she's a human, and we love her, and we're glad she works here. And it is not appropriate to say X, Y, or Z. So disrupting those points. And then, it's hard because the ally now is allying with the person who, for whatever reason, has learned that that's not right and feels strongly against whatever that difference is. But now there's more. And then hopefully as that person becomes in the minority, then they will understand, and hopefully you'll chip through that bigoted behavior and say, well, okay, you're right. I do appreciate her. I know her. She's nice. She's kind. She's never done anything against me. And whatever it is that gets that person closer to being an ally themselves, that may be the pivotal moment where they then start their journey of like, oh my gosh, the world is unjust. I can't believe I used to feel that way. And now suddenly I'm an ally for trans people. So, it's really hard, but it of course depends on the environment you're working and how many people are willing to take those risks. But I think from a management perspective, that is the goal. You start chipping away at people's understanding and awareness, and that's through training and talking and really being vocal about difference instead of putting it to the side and being like, oh, until we have a trans person, we just won't deal with it. Right? And they have trans customers. That's one of the things you have to go to is people are drawn to inclusive environments as customers too. So whether you're an employee or a customer, you're hopeful that transformation will occur.
Yeah, and obviously we have a story, a case study, a person who is sharing her personal experience as a trans person, but there's also, the story could equally, a lot of it could apply to a lot of different kinds of identities, right? So certainly the experience that you shared about being harassed by customers, that could happen to a person around an ethnic orientation or body size or, all kinds of things, right? That harassment can be so what are some ways that allies in that environment might have responded to that kind of harassment differently?
And it's tricky when it's a customer. So the customer is always right. You're right in being a bigot. So the only disruption I could think of when she was telling the story was what you said, that if a coworker to be like, no, she of course was in the women's restroom because she's a woman, kind of like, hey, your fears and concerns are not founded, right? Kind of disrupting that as a coworker because you still want to be nice to the customer and not cause that person to not buy the corn dog or whatever. But that's not always the case. So often, and of course management often takes that path of least resistance, which I don't appreciate how they handled your story, but it's one of those things that coworkers can stand up for coworkers and step in with each other, but with customers it's trickier. And so I don't know, does anybody else have any ideas of how this scenario could have gone differently if even another customer, and I tend to be another customer who's going to be like, hey, really, she is obviously a woman. Of course she's going to, so kind of stepping in a place in a conversation I'm not supposed to be, that's kind of me. But that's me. And I would probably, you have to assess the situation, see if you're going to get punched or whatever it is, but then you would do that. And so customers who are witnessing what is this, harassment of an employee can also step in as allies. And you hope they do, but that's not always the case. So it's a big, good question that it depends on the situation, depends on the scenario, and that's where you can operate in both worlds and all six of them. In your work environment, in your personal environment, in public spaces, you can operate as an ally and disrupt that type of oppression. And an ally can behave with lower risk depending on the situation. long answer, 'cause I love sharing. I'm sorry.
Well, and I mean, I think remembering something that you said during your presentation about how you've taken stands as an agent and fought some battles, and you've come to really appreciate how much easier and more gratifying it is to do it as an ally, or how gratifying it is, and how it can be a lot easier, because as a fellow customer, it doesn't take much. If the person who's harassing gives you a hard time, so what? You know, you're the customer too, and you're always right, right? I mean, you know what I mean? Yeah, they cancel each other out, right? So part of what the opportunity is around education is so that we can all become more relaxed about taking those smaller risks as allies, because we all want a world where everybody can be themselves. Other comments and questions? Yes.
So, Kristen, I was asking about how long you'd been with Town Pump, just because I was curious what kind of relationships you had with your coworkers, with your manager, whether there had been time for trust to develop. I mean, time doesn't always lead to trust, of course, but I'm interested in hearing about what your perceptions were of your coworkers and your manager, and how comfortable you felt being your full self with them, and how that influenced how you decided to move forward.
Yeah. Okay, so I think I'm going to back up a little before I came out to give you that better idea. So for most part, relationships with my coworkers seem to be going pretty well. Granted, some of them were reading me as something that I'm just not the typical male then, because I was like acting obviously effeminate, so I'm sure people were placing label gay on me, which wasn't too appreciated because that's not who I was. But aside from the point, that's like how I was being read. Aside from that, relationships were still okay. And then like after I had came out, it was still good. However, I feel like that people were like being more cautious around me and like getting more nervous because they didn't like want to accidentally say the wrong thing, whether it be like misgender, misname, which granted that did go on quite frequently for a while. People didn't really start catching on to that until like 2 to 3 months after, when it came around, like say 90% of the time. Otherwise, yeah, I was still able to get in like normal conversations or play jokes and whatnot, but it's added with that people are being cautious type deal. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, obviously this is a very courageous letter that you wrote, and I wonder how much that your ability to have that courage was fostered by feeling like this is, I think this is a relatively safe environment, or I'd just like to hear more about that.
Sure. Turn this off. The red button.
Okay. So basically piggybacking off your question, I think my biggest motivation at the time was to lift that huge weight off my shoulders, because, you know, I was like sitting there hiding something. That's what I thought about all day, every day. So when that did, that's basically became my huge motivation at the end of the day. It was getting that weight off my shoulders and giving myself permission to be who I really should be versus someone that I'm not. Because, I mean, that's where a lot of my stress and anxiety came from, was being that former self, and then be able to just like, hey guys, this is me now. So I appreciate if I can get your support. And that, I felt a lot better after that.
So it was kind of an incremental process with a major breakthrough moment. Oh, good. That's nicer. So other comments and questions, and it occurs to me that it might be interesting to hear about experiences that people have experienced in their workplaces or in customer environments or situations where that you've observed or participated in. Anybody? Yes.
Well, I for the first time am working in an environment where I feel like I'm a bartender, and it is definitely female focused behind the bar, and I get a lot of sexist comments all the time. But I've worked a lot of customer service positions, and I feel like being a bartender for the first time ever, I'm in the position where I can speak back. The customer is not always right. I can say no. You can go somewhere else because we have many, many other people that are happy to give me their money, you know. So it's this strange dualistic position where I feel very empowered to speak up for myself, but also very kind of polarized or on display, which is something very unusual for me. But I had a situation where, you know, when I first started working at the bar, I was very timid because I was used to being very apologetic and, you know, oh, I'm so sorry, let me make this better. And I had never really freaked out on anybody, you know, like set my boundaries, I guess. And somebody came in on a very slow morning, and he said something. He made a very racist joke to this Korean man that was sitting next to him at the bar, and I said, that is absolutely not okay. Like, I'm not okay with that. I work here, and you know, right now my what I say is law. He was like, whoa, I can say whatever I want. I was like, actually, you can't, because this is my bar. So if you're gonna behave like this, you need to leave. And that was kind of like a huge breakthrough moment where I was like, oh yeah, I can do whatever I want here. I'm in charge. And that was like really empowering to be a huge ally for somebody who he doesn't speak very well English. His English is not very good, and I'm sure he's kind of gotten used to this racism. And yeah, I don't know. I guess I just wanted to share that's the strange position of being like polarized but empowered at the same time.
Great story. Thank you for sharing that. Thanks for stepping up. And you're forever different after that day,
Yeah,
right? Like
yeah.
now you know.
Nobody will ever cross me again.
So yeah, I really did love that story. I would say I would probably end up doing the same for myself, working in that retail environment, because I don't really want to call myself that, but I'm still kind of rather a minority, because obviously majority of people are not this. So I would probably stick up for any others. I would be more than happy to speak up, because I don't think my job would have a problem with that, whether it be with other customers or employees. So otherwise, if they did, I would make a statement about it and get that changed as soon as possible. But I would say I'd just do the same thing. That's all I really want to say.
And I'm so glad that your management supports you to be empowered to keep the bar safe for everybody, to be customers in that environment. Yeah, and I'm noticing too that how much similarity there is between these examples that we're talking about and bullying and cyberbullying, and you know, there's a lot of with the terrorism that happens in the world. There's a lot of tendency to villainize certain groups of people, and so there's a lot of different angles that this takes and could take in any workplace. Other comments, questions, examples, questions? What would you do in an environment? You know, have you had an experience that you're not sure what to do with, or any other? Great.
Yeah, I guess kind of stemming off of the question that I had asked you earlier. For me, I mean, there was an experience that I just recently had with a coworker where, fortunately, I work in a place that's very accepting, you know, very diverse, DirecTV is awesome about that. And one of the coworkers who I was speaking to, I'm trying to work on being more out when it's a person who I'm not as sure about that they'll take it positively. And I wasn't sure, and so it was just, a comment of, what did you do? Oh, I had a great time with my girlfriend, I did this. It was kind of a pause, and he's like, oh, so how's being gay working out for you? And for me, it was a moment where I'm very non-confrontational, but I'm also at the same time trying to really work on taking bigger stands. And I wanted to, at first I was furious, but then I thought, no, this is a moment where maybe he just hasn't spoken to somebody, from my perspective, my identity. And so I was just open, and I just had that kind of conversation about it. And it wasn't like a debate, but I guess it was more a sharing of perspectives. And in the end, we kind of came to a point where it was like agreeing to disagree. And I was glad that he listened. He wasn't combative or anything. But I just still felt dissatisfied with the way that the conversation ended. That this is a person who's on my team, and now it's that I'm kind of disappointed that I'm hesitant to speak with him, because it was, and I just don't know how to move forward and continue trying to have that positive influence, and I'm not really quite sure the next step to take with that. So if anybody has advice, that'd be cool.
As said girlfriend, I would be happy to talk. No.
Said girlfriend would be happy to talk to him. Did you want to speak?
No, she was. I probably should.
I was thinking this might. Oh, we have a suggestion back here. Great.
I moved here from Florida, and this was one of the first things that I was really struck by, with the cultural differences in a place that is very multicultural, very diverse, to moving to a place that is the opposite of that. And we feel safe here in Missoula in our bubble of academia. We do have a lot of diversity for the state of Montana right here. And what I would strongly suggest is just continue to be a person to that person. That's the most important thing. And I definitely think that it's something that, you had mentioned you were on the city limits, you weren't sure about, how people would take it. The truth is, inside Missoula even, but especially outside of Missoula, there's a lot of barriers still. And to remain, open and human and confident in who you are is the most important thing, to change that person's perspective slowly, and not be upset that you couldn't change him in one conversation, because those sort of changes aren't really lasting. It takes time and a lot of bravery, which you obviously showed, but coming from a place where this was never an issue, it's kind of the norm that people come from different backgrounds and have different perspectives. This place is not that way, so there's a lot of work to be done, and just keep at it, be confident.
A lot of wisdom in this room. It's really great to hear. Liz.
I don't have any wisdom to add, but I share in this struggle, because it's I can't get over the hurdle about religion. I can't get over that there is, and I'm a secular person, and I don't understand how you can not love and promote equality and never get there. Like, that person may come from a place where, well, my religion says, I'm sorry, I cannot accept you as which is like, you got to value that, because that's diversity, right? We value, embrace diversity. We're tolerant of difference. We embrace difference. But I struggle with that one. And so that's where I've tried to figure out, I tried to learn, educating myself. And I come from a Catholic background, so I have a lot of good reason to be secular. No offense to the Catholics in the room. But, still to this day, I couldn't be a priest, so there's no room in that religion for me. So similarly, there are religious beliefs that I just can't say, well, and then there's the both and. They can believe in this doctrine that says, no, we don't accept homosexuality. However, we can claim, there's this new thing that we can still include it in our non-discrimination clauses, but we really don't in our heart of hearts believe it's true, or we're going to live it. And it's like, you can't do that. You know, and I'm not dogmatic. It's not, you know, but I do believe that there, in my heart of hearts, I hope people will understand out of humanity that but there's places where religious mindset stops what I call logic, but you know what I'm saying? So that's my struggle too. And I want them, I'm satisfied in knowing that I've educated to that point of saturation. I've done all I can do, but sometimes you just have to walk away and hope they get there on their own, which is even harder because you never get the satisfaction of seeing them change, right? So, and thank you for those comments. Those are, I mean, we do live in a bubble here. And one of the things I'll add as an ally in Missoula is it's hard here. I'm raising a daughter in Missoula and she's 7, and I'm trying my hardest to encourage interaction with difference and showing her the diversity and how do you navigate that. And it's really hard, especially around race and ethnicity. And I'm just like, I don't know. And that was, you know, I came through Montana myself and grew up here, but I had to unlearn racism. I had to stop being a racist because I didn't know I was. And I had been taught to be one. So it's like, oh, that's a process I don't want my daughter to have to go through. And the only way is this contact with difference. So I'm concerned about that too. There's 2 things.
Well, and I've lived in places where there's a lot more cultural and ethnic diversity, and I miss it here. You know, I love living here, and it's something that I feel like is an area where we need to, as Missoulians, really, you know, and Montanans, really, you know, find ways to work hard, you know, to put some extra effort in to be citizens of the world, you know, in our big sky country. One of the things that one of the themes that in this conversation that I want to pick up on is this theme of, you know, just the process that it takes a person to unlearn bigotry or whatever, you know, attitudes we've absorbed. A lot of times we've absorbed them without having a lot of personal self-reflection or time to really think it through for ourselves. It's like we just do what, you know, and never have it questioned. So when somebody does, you know, start to bring it to our awareness, maybe it takes, as you say, time for that to happen. One of the stories that I read that really made a big difference for me was Studs Terkel. I don't know how many people are familiar with Studs Terkel, who interviewed a lot of people a number of years ago. Interviewed a man who had been a Klansman in the South, and it's a great story called Why I Quit the Klan. And it's the story of a young man who grew up in the South, working class and poor, and how he talked about in this interview how much of a sense of pride in himself he got from being involved in the Klan that he had never had before. That it was the first place in his life where he was ever valued, where he ever had any kind of sense of that he mattered to anybody about anything, and he became a leader in the Klan. And through a process of having to confront an African American woman over their issue related to their children through the schools, he gradually woke up and saw how destructive racism is and how painful it is for everybody, not just for people of color, but for everybody. And he became an ally. He became a real avid activist or an outspoken person around racism. So look it up if you want to read a great story. Why I Quit the Klan.
I just wanted to make a point about like how we're talking about creating inclusive workplace environments and kind of what that looks like and why it's sustainable. And you look at the Ku Klux Klan and just it's very exclusive. It's only accepting of one type of person, and they're very against another type of person. And that's just not a sustainable way to live your life. Like, you're going to die out if all you have is that exclusive group of people. So it's just interesting, you know, kind of a comparison between that exclusive group and the kind of inclusive work environments we want to create that will create inclusive communities. Because it does leak, like our labor does have a huge effect on, you know, community workplace environments. So it's just, you know, interesting. Just want to make that note.
Great.
Yes. 2 things. The religion part, I feel like a person will fall back on their religious beliefs to tell them how to feel in a situation when they're afraid. And I feel like people are afraid of something they don't know about. So, he hears you say girlfriend, and he's like, oh my gosh, she's gay. I don't know any gay people. That scares me. How I'm going to form my opinion of this person is to fall back on what I've been taught in my religion. I don't have to acknowledge you as a human being. I don't have to get to know you and know what you're like. I can just put you in a little box and say, someone told me to hate you. And I think that the way to combat that is to be a person, like Jess said. You know, be the person you are, and as hard as it is, to try to find out who that person is and relate on that really personal level. And the other thing in a work environment, especially like the one that we share, reach out for allies. We have a lot of allies there, you know? And if you ever feel like you want help, just ask for it, because there's a lot of help to be given there. And that's one great thing about that spot.
So we have some great workplaces in Missoula. I think we've got some employees of DirecTV that are feeling glad to work there.
I just wanted to comment on the point you made about religion and saying we're inclusive in all of those regards. I also grew up in the Catholic faith, so I share many of your opinions. But I think that we cannot tolerate religions that choose to oppress, or these bastardizations of religions that use their beliefs to try to oppress other groups of people. And it's interesting the leeway we give Christian faiths, because, for instance, if a Muslim man walked into work and said, every woman should be covered because that is part of my religious law, we wouldn't, I think it'd be a much harder sell than someone speaking to you in a pretty offensive way. And I think that needs to change. I think, as we've all said, allies need to step up and really have those hard conversations.
Thank you.
Kind of in contrast to the challenges that I think adults face, I have 3 sons, and I also have a very good friend who's a trans man, and they know him as a friend and the buddy and the guy who likes to play video games with them, and he's also an advocate here in Missoula, so he's very out and outspoken. And so I had a conversation with my sons about the fact that this person was born a woman, and he transitioned, and now he's happier in his life. And my 10-year-old said to me, so, Mommy, you're telling me that people hate him because he wanted to be the person he is? And I said, yeah. And he goes, well, Mommy, that's like being born without a hand or being born deformed and having somebody hate you for being born a way that is different than somebody else. And it's ironic to me and touching, it makes me almost cry, that this is the wisdom of a 10-year-old, somebody who has never understood hatred for someone being different. And as a parent, I feel incredibly proud that I have a friend who is a good person who I can have as an example for my sons and raise children who think it's unconscionable and can't even comprehend the fact that someone would hate him for the fact that he chooses to live his life in a way that makes him happy and is his true identity. So just as contrast to some of the challenges adults face, sometimes we need to look back at the naivete of children, and sometimes it's the kindest and most compassionate way to be. So just wanted to share that. A little pride in my sons.
Thank you, Jen. The wisdom of children, and also the importance of parenting, and in terms of. So I think we're technically at the end of the time that we're supposed to be together, and so I'm going to see if our panelists have any last thoughts you'd like to share, and invite everybody who would like to stick around a little longer if you'd like to keep talking. Do you have any last thoughts?
Yeah. So I really do appreciate all of you showing up today and listening to my stories. I hope this will help interview people in the long run when it comes to your own type of work environments. So if you ever have any questions or concerns in the future, or just want simple education or help your own coworkers out, please reach out to me and I will try to reach back.
Thank you very much, Kristen. Liz?
I would just like to echo the thank you for coming. This has been a great honor to talk with you. I'm going to give you this article, but it's just a teaser, and it's not the best one out there, so I just want to put it out there. But my email address is on that one-pager, so if you would like more materials to read or to have conversations. One of the things that I think that's the most difficult about being an ally is there's no support groups There's no way to recharge your battery because it can be exhausting. So I find in other allies a lot of energy and recommitment to the hard work of always stepping up and standing up. And so my contact's there, so feel free to use it anytime. And come visit us in the UC.
Come to the UC. Well, thanks again. I would like to just remind people that Kristen's letter to her boss is on our blog on the SBC website. We have a lot of other information there. We are really pleased to be able to host this conversation, these presentations and this conversation that's been really rich tonight, and I appreciate everybody's participation, and would love to have you come back in 2 weeks to find out about environmental health at work and get involved with the SBC in whatever way makes sense for you. So thanks again to everybody. Thanks to MCAT. Thanks to our sponsors. Thanks to Adventure Cycling for hosting us. Have a great night.